Okay, it's September 14th, 2003.
And what's your name?
My name is Robert Gheen.
And where were you born, Robert?
I was born in Osborne, Ohio, which is now Fairborn, Ohio.
Where do you currently live?
1374 Eastview Drive,
Okay.
Fairborn.
Now, where did you go to school?
I went to Osborne, Bath.
And what year did you graduate?
I graduated 1941, just before World War II.
Did you say when you were born?
And the day after I graduated, I went down to Wright Field, tried to get a job as an aircraft mechanic's helper. In that time, they wanted me to have 5 years aircraft experience, but
What did you have? What kind of experience did you have?
I just said during my my years in school, I'd go to the base, be around aircraft, go around the dump, and get tail wheels, put on soapbox racers, so I knew a little about aircraft.
Sure.
They could talk to me, and I built models all the time, so I had some aircraft experience, but not enough as they wanted.
Now you told me some stories about how the base was back then, and you're talking about Wright-Patterson. What was it called back then?
It was Patterson and Wright Field, two different fields. Wright Field, experimental, Patterson Field, Army Air Corps Depot.
Now, what was security like back then? Could you kids just walk on base, or
just walk on base?
And did you know all the guards?
Oh yeah, I had a paper route. I had a paper route on the base, so all the guards knew me.
Sure. And you guys just walk on base?
Just walk on.
And what would you do on base typically back then?
Be around aircraft. A lot of the factories would bring aircraft in.
What kind of planes were on the base back then?
Boy.
I mean, it was World War I aircraft, or
no,
World War II?
They were after World War I.
They were all the pre-World War II aircraft, right? Yeah. So, you told me a story about an airship that got loose and flew over one night.
Rainy, stormy night, they had a balloon hangar. Now, during the time I was around, airships was being removed from the Army. The Navy had them, but not the Army. So one night, one of the blimps broke loose in a rainstorm, caught fire, and it headed up Xenia Drive, burning. And it was dropping flaming parts off.
And it was floating over the...
And if that rain had been like that, Fairfield, Osborne would have burned up.
And this thing was just loose and flying over...
Just drifting east.
Yeah.
Right up Xenia Drive.
That must have been a sight to see at night.
And...
How old were you when that happened, you think?
Oh, I was very little, boy. I don't know how old I was darn little.
But you're under 10 years old.
But I always was around aircraft.
Sure. So, what'd they say when you went to the base to get a job?
Well, they about laughed at me when they found out how much experience I had. But in turn, they talked to me and find out I did know a little about aircraft.
Sure.
So they seen their way to hire me over there, but I couldn't work on an aircraft at the time. So I took care of an aircraft forms, all aircraft, called a Form 41. That was a big long form of all the accessories and everything on the aircraft you had to know. So every time we had a crash, it was never up to date. So I worked on that a few months, and they come and told me, well, you're going to do us more good out the hangar than you ever are going to do us push a pencil. So I went out in flight test. We basically had 3 different types of aircraft on every crew. I would, at that time, maybe have a P-38 and maybe a Ryan PT-20, a trainer, maybe an A-20. You'd be on it a few months. Then you change airplanes, B-17. I was around when the first B-24 from Ford came down, and it darn near crashed before it got here.
What happened?
Because they forgot to put rivets in the wing. So they grounded that thing right off. So then Ford had Lindbergh come down and look at this aircraft. It just about didn't make it. So Lindbergh flew a Grumman amphibian in, and he landed and rolled down toward the officers' club and got stuck in the mud down there. That was a big embarrassment for Lindbergh.
Sure.
But I was afraid to even talk to Lindbergh.
How come?
Well, he was just some god to me.
Yeah.
But we were always having, like, Wrong Way Corrigan came in. He was with Douglas. And we had some famous people come in the hangar.
Yeah. You were doing, I mean, that's where everything was happening. You guys were doing all the modifications and
on
working on the
experimental
planes.
work.
Yeah.
On accelerated service test. Fly them till they flew apart.
Wow.
We'd try to have 3 of every model and fly them till they no more would fly.
And they'd rotate a new plane in.
Then
all
we
the
bring
time.
another airplane in. Things were changing very fast.
Sure, sure. And what year did you start with the base, you say?
May of 41. Graduated one day, go down to find a job the next.
So you weren't there very long until December 7th happened.
That's right.
What was that
December
like?
7th, I was on Main Street up in Osborne. There was a restaurant called the Parkway. When I heard about Pearl Harbor could have been east of Enon. I wouldn't know it. I did know where Pearl Harbor was, but I soon found out.
Yes. How did the word come?
Huh?
How did you hear about it?
I heard on the radio.
What did you think?
I didn't know where Pearl Harbor was.
Yeah.
But that was on Sunday. They had us working 7 days on and 2 days off. Just happened I was off that day.
Oh.
So I was up in town.
So you were already working a pretty big shift.
Oh, yeah. Working 7 days on, 2 days off.
What hours did you work?
Well, we'd work days, we'd work swing shift, we'd work nights. We rotated.
I see.
They worked 24 hours around the clock.
Wow. So they were
That
really...
was even before the war started. They started doing that.
So they were gearing up for war pretty big time before the war broke out. And so what did you do after December 7th?
I
how did it
stayed
change?
working for accelerated test. Then the guys started being drafted. Well, when I was supposed to get drafted, they said, well, you're going to stay here. You're not going anyplace. I had a bunch of relatives in town.
Sure.
Now, there were some guys that stayed here.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of bad things said about them.
Yeah.
So, about the time I was to be drafted, I went down and seen the Navy. I said, I'd like to try flying for the Navy. Well, I didn't have a college education. I had high school.
Right.
So, they thought it was a pretty good idea to go in the Navy. So I left Dayton in January of 43. I'd signed up in December of 42, but come January, I left Dayton to Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
There were 33 of us that went to Great Lakes, and 13 of us stayed. The others come back to Dayton. They must have been the dumbest doctors in the world, whoever looked us over, to have that many guys flunk out.
Yeah.
So I went in boot camp for 12 weeks.
Mm-hmm. So you trained at Great Lakes Naval Training Center, and what happened when you got out of there?
Great Lakes Naval Air Training Stand.
Yeah.
So we took tests up there, and I remember in my medical, when I'd go through and to see what good a shape I was in, the medical form stamped in big red letters, qualified aviation submarine. And boy, I thought, submarine, I'm gonna be, if I ever to get on a sub, it's gonna be something else. So I was selected to go to Navy Pier in Chicago. There was an aviation based on machinist school.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through there and I did pretty good. And at that time in Navy Pier, all the instructors had a book on their rate. So when I come out of there, I had a pair of wings on my rate. And they wanted me to stay at Great Lakes to be an instructor.
Of what?
Aviation.
Oh, okay.
Something. So I still wanted to be a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd go up to Glenview, Illinois.
Right.
Then I'd come back down to Navy Pier. And then, in the end, I went to Advanced Mechanics Machinist School.
Now tell me about what was going on at the Navy Pier and why you went there. What was going on?
Well,
there?
that's an aviation school.
That's
they
an aviation
put you
school.
through aviation.
Okay.
Even doing blacksmith work.
Oh, I see.
Blacksmith was one thing
Yep.
an aircraft mechanic had to know.
And what was up at Glenview?
Is a flight school.
That's where the flight school was for aviation.
They had two carriers out on Lake Michigan,
Okay.
the Wolverine and the Sable.
Wow.
That's where you'd learn the carrier landings.
Pretty
But
neat. That's pretty cool.
I was still pretty young.
So where would they fly from to go to the pier, to the carrier?
Great, Glenview,
They'd fly from
right
Glenview.
there on the coast.
Okay. And they'd fly over into Michigan, Lake Michigan,
They'd
and then
fly out of Lake Michigan,
Yeah.
land,
come back.
if they made it.
Right. Did you see crack-ups?
Oh, there were a lot of them.
Oh,
A
man.
lot of crack-ups.
What kind of planes were they flying then?
Oh, F4Fs, SBDs.
Tell me about one of the crack-ups you saw.
Well, I didn't see them. I
Oh,
wasn't
yes.
allowed on a carrier.
Okay.
I was still in aviation school.
So you became a mechanic, or they sent you to mechanic school. And where was that at? You said?
That's a Navy Pier.
At Navy Pier. And what happened when you got out of there?
Then they still couldn't get me in for pilot training, so they sent me to Advanced Machinist School. That was in South Chicago. It was called 87th and Anthony. Boy, that was like dying to go into heaven when you went there.
How come?
It was a good school,
Mhm.
fed you good,
Yeah.
real good. So I went through there, then come time to graduate, and I still by that time they'd quit having enlisted pilots. You had to either be an officer to be a pilot, or
Sure.
so at that time I left 87th and Anthony, and I was sent to the West Coast, and that's to Alameda.
Mm-hmm.
So we formed a carrier squadron with F-6F Hellcats, TBFs, Grummets, and Douglas SBD dive bombers.
Okay.
So as we got the airplanes, Alameda was pretty crowded, so they sent us to Moffett Field, south of Alameda.
Mm-hmm.
There was a big lighter air base. So we had the Navy blimps, the Hellcats, right there together. So we kept our airplanes right there.
Sure.
And we got ready to go to the South Pacific. And then we took the airplanes all up to Alameda.
Which planes did you take out there?
Hmm?
Which planes did you take there?
Navy Hellcats,
You took them all up there?
F-6s,
Okay.
TBFs, SBDs.
All right.
So we put them aboard we put the aircraft aboard a big cargo, a real big cargo ship.
Mm-hmm.
Now the Japs weren't that dumb. They could tell what we were carrying.
Mm-hmm.
Now we had canvas on the airplanes on the deck. We put the good airplanes down where you couldn't see them. The SBDs were kept on the deck, covered up,
Mm-hmm.
but they still looked like an airplane. So then
So you tried to fool them and think that the junky planes were on that ship, or something.
them Japs aren't that dumb.
Okay.
They knew.
Yeah.
So then we got orders to go to South Pacific. We didn't know where we were going, and
Mhm.
weren't told. We were going by the Hawaiian Islands when they told us that we were going to the Russell Islands in the Pacific. That's halfway between Guadalcanal and Bougainville.
Okay.
By the time we got to near the Russell Islands, it wasn't safe to put the airplanes on the island.
Wow.
So one night, I seen a ship out there, and I just happened to be on watch that night. Then I turned, we had a destroyer come up alongside, and we turned our cargo ship around. We were zigzagging as we didn't have a straight course,
Sure.
so we zigzagged, turned around, then we started heading for another island to put these airplanes off on. Because the original place, Russell's, weren't safe to put them off. So I don't know how many islands. Esperito, New Hebrides, we went there, can't put them off.
Mm-hmm.
We went to Ifadi, New Hebrides, and there was a Marine outfit there, a bunch of war-weary Marines, and they finally said, well, we'll put them off here with the Marines. So we offloaded all the airplanes and all the parts that we were carrying,
Sure.
and the Marines had one F4U-1 that they had trouble getting to fly. They couldn't get it out of the place that we were at.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first airplane I worked on out in the Pacific to get out of there. But in the meantime, the Marines were going to show how hot those F4Us were, and one day they put a big show on for us. And they went up through the clouds with two of them. Well, one guy throttled back. The other guy didn't know enough to throttle back, so they mid-air collision. And I seen an R2800 Pratt & Whitney come down out of the cloud just screaming. The engine running. And of all places, it crashed right near a native village. Boy, that had been something. Mm-hmm. And on that island, Palmolive owned all the palm trees, mm-hmm. coconut palms. So we had to really watch what we did there on that island.
Sure.
But it was like a jungle.
Yeah.
In fact, we couldn't find the runway sometimes. But I stayed there.
Let's take a break, okay? Okay. Tell me about what would... I understand that something would happen if a palm tree was smashed up somehow.
Well, if you hit a palm tree with an airplane, the Navy had to pay Palmolive $200 to $300 for each tree. So we definitely didn't hit a tree. If the Japs hit them, they got nothing. So while I was on the island, I spent several months on the island with a carrier outfit, getting the airplanes ready to, we'd send them to different carriers when they needed a certain type of aircraft. So Naval Air Transport would fly in with seaplanes, PBMs. They were twin engine. Coronados were 4-engine, consolidated. And since I had right field, I had multi-engine experience. Mm-hmm. So seemed like every airplane come in, they needed some work done on it. So I'd get sent down to take care of these flying boats and keep them going. So I thought after World War II, they won't need many mechanics that worked on Hellcats. So the old World War I pilot, there was my boss.
What was his name?
We call him 4-0 Brown. See, 4-0 in the Navy is about as good as you can get.
Oh.
He thought you were supposed to be a genius, so we call him 4-0 Brown. I don't remember his first name.
Okay.
He was a lieutenant commander, World War I pilot,
sure. But
darn good one.
Yeah.
But he could fly Hellcats or anything.
Wow.
So I went up before him once and asked if I could be put in Naval Air Transport, because that's, mm-hmm. after the war, that's big airplanes.
Sure.
So he got me transferred over into Naval Air Transport. And I went to New Caledonia. That was the end of the run in the Pacific for in Naval Air Transport. Well, I'd be at New Caledonia. They kept the airplanes down to sea level. But if I got sick or got hurt, I'd have to walk way up the mountain to the hospital. I never figured that out. But lucky I didn't get hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in the meantime, since I was the end of the run, and Honolulu was the beginning of the run, I'd go back and forth, all these little islands. One island we'd stop at was Funafuti. Mm-hmm. Now, if Amelia Earhart could have seen that island, she'd have been living today, maybe.
How come?
Well, she crashed because she ran out of fuel or something.
Sure.
But Funafuti, boy, it was quite a place.
What was it like?
Well, about a half a mile wide and 3.5 miles long, and every time the wind would blow, the water would go over the island, and the guys would only stay there 3 months at a time.
Mm-hmm.
It was an emergency landing place.
Yeah.
Now, by the time I started going there, they had a runway carved out of that island that land-based airplanes. But if you landed there, you had to work on your own airplane to get it ready to fly out. Boy.
Now, what was New Caledonia like?
Hmm?
What was New Caledonia like?
It was owned by the French.
Mm-hmm.
The one island I was on right there was called Ile Nou. That's where we kept the airplanes. But across the bay was Noumea. That's where I could go. And like their meat market, they'd have the meat right outside. It was pretty bad.
Oh, it was bad? Oh.
It was a big nickel mine.
Oh. Oh. But
One night,
yeah.
we were at a movie, and I looked down, and a ship blew up in the harbor. Nickel mine. I don't know why it blew up. But that ended the movie that night.
But was it a military ship that blew up?
No.
Just a nickel mining
cargo
ship?
ship hauling nickel.
Wow. So it was a pretty prominent place. It was very nice to live there.
But basically, New Caledonia fed the Pacific.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
We'd come in, and now it wasn't called spam at the time, but it was meat just like it.
Yeah.
Boy, there's acres and acres of all kind of food.
Yeah.
Boy.
So what happened after that? You were in military transport?
I'd go back to Honolulu, get a load of cargo.
Uh-huh.
Then we'd bring it back down to all these islands we'd be sent to. Then the later part of the war, I know on one hop I made, Bong, he was a Army Air Corps P-38 pilot, an ace. He come down on a dock, and we were to haul him back to Honolulu.
Uh-huh.
After he got to Honolulu, I don't know who brought him back to the States. But shortly thereafter, he crashed a P-80, was killed.
Uh-huh.
But I come back up to Honolulu, and one day, the war was about over in 45, and I didn't know about an A-bomb, and I was ready to go back down the Pacific. And about 4 days, they said the war was over. We celebrated 4 times. All at once, it was the right time. So then I stayed in Honolulu and then sent back to Moffett Field again.
Now, what do you mean you celebrated 4 times?
Well, they thought the war was over, but it wasn't.
Each day they thought it was over.
Right.
And then it was the next
But
day.
one day was the right time.
So how do you mean they had reports that it was over? Describe that.
For some reason.
Do you remember about it?
But then after World War II was over, I got liberty in Honolulu, the real day of VJ Day. I went to Honolulu. I remember I had to cap my hat on top of my head. I was supposed to keep it squared up. I didn't.
Now, you kind of skipped over VE Day. I mean, what was it like when we're done with that? Hold on. Okay, you had an interesting story about before you were in air transport. You were with a carrier
unit?
unit?
I was with a carrier outfit. I and another fellow from Cincinnati, we built a boat out of a drop tank from a Navy Hellcat, and we had a practice water bomb. I used that for an outrigger, and we borrowed an engine off the Army, And this fella from Cincinnati built a controllable prop for this boat. And boy, it would go good. But we had a lot of battleships in this harbor, and we'd run this boat around the harbor, and some admiral on it said we were demoralizing the troops to not have this boat. So our boss, he just said, well, hide the thing to when the Navy battleships leave, then take it out. When they come back, why, hide it again.
And where was this at?
Fighting New Hebrides.
And what did you do when you're out on the boat? You go fishing or
Just
goof around?
Just ride around.
Sound like fun.
It was a barrel of fun.
What did you do with it after you left? Or did you keep it? Or
somebody got it after I left.
Yeah, okay.
I don't remember.
That must have been a sight. It was made out of a bomb. What was it? A water bomb?
A belly tank from a F-6F Hellcat.
Okay.
And then a water bomb is about a 200-pound water bomb. Drain it so it's a good float.
Yeah.
Made an outrigger.
Okay.
So the belly tank wouldn't turn over.
Okay.
So we enjoyed it.
Yeah. Now, what kind of stuff did you do when you were not working?
Build a boat or
yeah.
something.
Like you said.
I got a picture frame right here with 20 millimeter shells,
Sure.
50 caliber bullets, and 30 caliber.
And you said you could go see a movie once in a while, and
Well, we had movie. I could, on aircraft, if I didn't have to work, I could go to movie every night.
oh, okay.
But everybody on the ship, they'd only half the ship be able to come over at night and see a movie.
What's one of the movies you saw? Do you remember any of the movies?
Well, just any movie. We'd watch anything.
And what did you do when you were working? I mean, what type of things did you do to the aircraft when you were as a
Keep them
mechanic?
flying.
But I mean, yeah, but
Made them fly.
sure.
You weren't specialist. If it needed a new propeller, you put one on. You hope to.
Yeah.
You had the parts.
Sure. And you get parts flown in all the time, and
Naval Air Transport were supposed to deliver.
and you had to order parts.
Had
that
to
you
order
needed.
them.
How long would it take to get stuff in, like a new engine, something like that?
I don't know.
Depending.
I forget.
That's okay. But you did everything on.
I know the worst joke they played on me was they told us, well, we're getting some tropical chocolate. I said, boy, that's good.
Yeah.
That's the worst trick they played on me.
What's that?
That chocolate's worthless.
What is it's tropical? It's not Hershey's.
In fact, it wouldn't melt if you put a blowtorch on it.
Could you
I
try
don't
that?
think.
Well, what kind? I mean, I know this sounds stupid, but what kind of things did you really? I mean, name the things you did on planes. I mean, what could you do
Well,
on
if
a
you
plane?
need an aileron, you put an aileron. If you need a flap, put a flap on. If it had bullet holes in, you'd try to repair it.
And you could
It's,
even
it's anything to keep an airplane flying.
and you'd even change the whole engine if you needed to, right?
Sure.
Okay. And you were qualified to repair the whole engine or
Right.
whatever if you had the parts for it.
And then when I got in Naval Air Transport, I'd be around Pan American Airways. Well, they helped me get what's called a commercial A&E license.
Wow, that's good.
So I got that in Honolulu.
And this is after the war?
No,
During
this
the war?
was during the war.
So
When
you
I'd come up to Honolulu for a few days,
Yeah.
I'd study and go take tests at the CAA at that time.
Right.
Then they said I was qualified to go up in front of a CAA inspector.
Sure. And now you were thinking ahead because you knew the war was not going to last
Well,
forever.
the war won't last forever.
You got to do
I
something.
wasn't going to stay in the Navy forever.
Sure. And you wanted to have a job when you got out. And that was real smart. So what happened after you said you heard
Well,
the...
when I was there at Honolulu,
Okay.
we had what's called one of the Martin Mars was assigned to our squadron. Well, after the war, the Navy bought a bunch of single-tail Mars. It's a big flying boat, very big.
Sure.
So at that time, I think I was a first-class aviation machinist when I was there at Honolulu. Well, they said if I'd sign up, I'd be sent to school, I'd be made chief, and I didn't even have a hash mark. That means 4 years. I only had 37 months in the Navy.
So you got out of the Navy, or the war ended. So what happened then?
Then I come back to here, back to right field.
Okay.
Then 38 and a half years, quit, retired.
What?
Yes.
What?
Retired.
You retired after 38 and a half years of being... What did you do here at Wright-Patterson, at Wright Field?
Worked on aircraft all the time.
But you were a civilian employee, right?
So civilian. I'd be sent to California to work.
And what part did you work in?
The whole airplane.
But what at Wright Field?
The whole airplane.
What's the department you were working in?
Flight test.
I worked for fighters.
You worked flight test, right?
Flight test,
Okay.
yeah.
And
It could be cargo airplane, helicopters.
Sure. And did you enjoy that?
When I first come back,
Yeah.
I was on helicopters altogether. Helicopters were brand new.
What kind of planes did you work on here? Just what models, like the Vietnam era aircraft? Or...
No, I worked on every airplane left over from World War II.
Okay.
Every new airplane.
Now, you got into some interesting stuff after the war. I mean, during that, you kind of got handpicked for a certain detail. And talking about your, I guess it's like real early stealth type work.
I'd go get sent to different factories for whatever aircraft they had.
Yeah.
If the Air Force was going to buy them, I'd normally go to school or be around the airplane before we got it here at Wright Field.
Sure. So they must have thought you were very qualified.
Well,
yeah.
I did pretty good.
Yeah. How did you get picked for the stealth program? Or how did that come about?
I was in cargo at the time, working on basically helicopters. And one day they said, you're going to the fighters. And I went over there. Then I was sent to California to pick up an airplane. That's when Earl Smith and I went out to California. And I brought this airplane. It's a single engine. Okay, when I decided the airplane was safe enough to bring back here, a pilot went out to get it and brought it back, and I still didn't know what we were doing.
What kind of plane was it?
It was basically an old P-80 that was cut in two and made into a T-33. So when we got done with it, they knew the airplane was going to be junk. So that's the reason I got this airplane.
And where did you go in California?
Looked the airplane over and see it was...
No, where did you go?
Went out on the X-15s. They had 3 of them there. And this airplane was basically flew to photograph the X-15s.
Okay.
But they were done with it at that time.
Yeah. Was this Edwards, obviously?
This was at Factory North American.
Okay. And what town was that near?
Downey.
Downey, okay.
Downey, California.
So you were the only guy there that went out there first? Or
There were
you
2 of us.
You and that other guy?
One Earl Smith looked over the paperwork. See, they'd basically loaned this airplane to North American. And basically I was to get it back if it was still good enough shape.
Yeah.
They could have ruined it.
Sure.
I knew I was going to ruin it.
So you put it back together, make it T-33, and then
No, it was already a T-33.
Yep. And so
a prototype job.
okay. So you guys got it back here to Rat Pat.
Got it back here, and I still didn't know what I was doing.
Did they fly it back?
We flew it back.
Okay.
Then it went in a room. Nobody could come to see you.
Where at?
It was up in Building 13 in a room all by itself.
And this is on Patterson Field, of course.
On Patterson, not Wright Field.
Sure.
Now, see, I was dealing with Wright Field people
Yep. The researchers.
on Patterson Field.
Sure. And that
I
was kind
still
of...
didn't know what I was doing.
Still didn't know. And no one could talk to you? No one could come in?
Nobody could come to see me. If you come to see me, they'd tell you something, and they'd come around and get me,
Yeah.
and they'd bring me back to where you could see me, but you didn't know where I come from.
And so what did they have you doing?
Building this airplane up. We didn't know what we were doing. We were told to do certain things.
Like what?
Well, you had to cover this airplane with, it's about like making a ceramic airplane.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up, we were heavier than we were supposed to be.
Oh.
Now we had, Gus Grissom was one of our pilots. And he got later an astronaut and got killed.
Yeah. So he was, how many test pilots did you have?
2 at the most.
So Gus Grissom, what kind of guy was he like?
I liked him very good. You could talk to him.
Sure.
He
And
was hard-headed.
how do you mean?
He had opinion.
Sure.
But if you'd tell him what you were going to do, and if he thought it was a pretty good idea, he'd sort of go along with it.
Sure.
I always got along good with him.
Then you
Other
said,
people said, boy, you can't get along with him sometimes. Well,
he's a man
to
of
be an
conviction.
astronaut, maybe he was a little funny.
Yeah.
To what?
Sure. So, but what would how would you interact? When did you first meet him? I mean, he
I
was.
forget what year it was.
We know now that he was a local guy that had a Cub Scout group in the church, and he flew at Barnhart's, and you had a plane up there too.
Yeah.
But
He was just another pilot,
just another guy.
now another mechanic.
Yep. And what would you decide when you interacted with him? Things about how the pilot cockpit would be,
Well,
or
when the airplane, what you could have in the airplane, what you couldn't have. When we got to where the point was we were too heavy,
mm-hmm.
we had to throw out a bunch of stuff.
Right.
It's an experimental airplane. You didn't know 10 minutes ahead of time what you were going to do.
Right.
But when we flew it around here, nobody was supposed to look at the airplane, but that's a dumb thing.
Well, tell me about that. There was a guy that was in charge of it, and
Yeah, the hangar foreman, he couldn't come in and talk to me even.
really,
But when I'd get ready to take the airplane, I and another fellow, we'd take it out, and they'd tell people, don't look at this airplane. And that's the dumbest thing I ever heard.
because everybody wanted to look at it then,
Yeah, everybody wants to look at it.
and they'd have to take it out of that building.
And tow it to some place that the airplane didn't look like a sore thumb.
Right. And they'd take it out and fly it, basically.
Take it out and fly it. Fly it between Wright Field and Patterson, basically. If the airplane was to crash, it was supposed to go in Wright or Patterson, not go out here in some field and go in.
Yeah, because it was so classified. Would you
At
say
that time,
Did you know it was way more than top secret or top secret?
not necessarily. I didn't know what it was. We had a number I went by. No, many years later,
Yeah.
over here at the history office, they wanted to know something about it. And I knew enough just to blow my head off by mixing these chemicals. I still don't know the formula we used.
What kind of chemicals did you use?
Well, that's what I forget. Antimony was one.
Antimony or antimony?
Antimony.
Yeah. And
but if you mix it, the thing gets violent, burns.
Sure. And so you mixed up this mixture, and then basically kind of.
If we mixed it right, no trouble. About like mixing paint.
Sure.
But if you mix it wrong, it gets violent.
How do you mean?
Well, it'd catch fire and burn.
Wow.
Like we'd make a part. If you didn't mix enough, they'd run a little short.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you had to know what to add so the stuff wouldn't boil.
Yeah.
And catch fire.
And so what did you do with that mixture that you made? Did you shape the plane?
Formed it like an aircraft part that went on the airplane. So you made one part at a time.
So you basically redesigned this or replaced the parts on the plane with this special material.
Covered the airplane so the radar, it wouldn't be picked up.
Yeah.
Now, Grissom, we'd have two airplanes. One airplane, they knew where it was all the time.
Mm-hmm. But
the one we built up, they couldn't find it. Now, I could look up and see it. I knew where it was. But according to needles, why?
So the radar wouldn't pick it up. And the other plane, almost identical to it.
You picked up.
Okay. So it really did work.
It worked very good, but it was so heavy.
Sure. Now, who was the person you were directly in charge, responsible to?
Oh man.
Or who do you remember that was with you, working on it?
Well, Wanzer was the mechanic that he and I were the last two guys to be around the airplane. And when they found it was going to be a pretty good deal, then they brought Lockheed in on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's your F-117.
Wow. And what year was this that you were doing this? Or that you went to California?
The early 50s. I went out to get the airplane and we started this thing.
What do you remember what year the first time you went to California?
Well,
about
early 50s to get the airplane, to start on it.
How many years did you work on it?
I basically went to prison 4 years. I'd come home at night.
Yeah.
Now the people on the 117, they'd maybe go away a week, never come home.
Did you
but
know
at least
those?
I come home, I smelled a little funny.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
So you
still do.
So you were kind of like the original Skunk Works, weren't you?
That was sort of like it.
Because I mean, you were mixing all these skunky materials up that smelled bad and they'd burn if they didn't get mixed right. So what?
Yeah, there's one engineer over here said, "Well, you guys are smarter than the guys at Skunk Works."
Why?
Because of what we did.
Yeah, yeah.
Linda Mood always said we were smarter than the guys out there.
Did you know the guys working 117?
Some of them. We at Oshkosh we'd see a fella.
But I mean, back then, did you know? Did you know of the F-117 program going on?
No, not really. No.
You just heard about it later.
Right, later.
How did that? Tell me. You flew the plane. It worked okay. People were told not to look at the plane, which is kooky, and they had to take it down the runway. And how did the program kind of wrap up that you were involved in?
I don't know where they junked that airplane at.
But how about you though? I mean, what did you do? I mean, how did you leave the program or whatever happened?
Well, I was based on aircraft mechanic. Fly it, get it ready to fly. If the engine didn't work, you worked on the engine.
But so how long did you worked on it until how long? Like 1950?
I think 57. I quit working on it.
Okay. And then what did you do after that?
I went back on helicopters, a Chinook.
Now you told me that when you were working on this special program, that the hangar was set up in a real weird way. Describe that.
Well,
This is building 14 or 13?
Building 13, they built a room. Nobody could see in it, but you had to ring a buzzer to get in.
And so this is a room that just held that airplane, and that's your department.
145, a south end. When we got it ready to fly, we brought it down here.
Oh,
same room almost.
You're saying this hangar 145, the south end of that hangar?
Right.
You were in that hangar too?
And that's where it flew from.
Okay.
The whole time.
Oh, and you kept it there also?
Kept it there.
So you manufactured it kind of up in there in 13, and then went
13,
down.
After the factory guys left at 13, I don't know, they tore that room up.
Yeah. Who do you remember from the factory? Do you know any of the names of the guys that worked with you?
I don't. Not now.
It's too long ago, right? And there are hardly any pictures of this.
I wish I had got a picture.
Yeah.
I don't know of any picture.
Because it was so classified, they had
Right,
almost no
that
pictures.
time.
And this was literally the predecessor to the 117, because I know the 117 started in 1959, and way back when, on their chime, like their official time chart.
They thought at right field this was going to work.
Yeah.
And that's when they got Lockheed interested in it.
You think then the whole thing just probably moved out to California? Probably. All right. So then you went back to Chinook testing, and
I went to a Chinook, and it was a wood mock-up when I first went to it. It was no real airplane. It was a wood mock-up.
And did you had to go to Alaska and different places for it to test it? And
Florida, Alaska.
They even went to Florida to test the coldness of it and the hot and the heat. Say that.
Well, you had the cold weather test.
Like a hot desert
Alaska,
test?
another test.
Yeah.
We never did a hot weather test. I guess they figured.
If you can handle Florida, it was okay.
Right.
Well, and what did you work on after that? And you were basically doing.
Then I come back.
What was that story?
Then I got sent to bombers. That's when I went on a C-135. That was satellites.
Now on the Chinook though, there was a certain story that I heard that you were kind of had to get on somebody about something.
Oh yeah.
What was that?
They wanted to can me.
How come?
Well, down in Florida, we had so many failures. Well, we had failures at the factory.
Sure.
But they finally said the thing's got to fly. So at Florida, we had trouble. We flunked one test down there, had to go back another time. And I said, well, one more failure, we're going to go to Philadelphia on a flat car. And that was the worst thing to say to that factory. Boy, 'cause they thought that was the greatest aircraft in the world. This guy, Stutzman, he razzes me all the time. A fellow man, 41 to 80, why?
What island was that you're talking about?
Ifadi.
What happened there?
Well, the natives would come around and see you. They'd come around the airplanes. And
they liked you guys?
They'd bring stocks of bananas, and we'd give them a quarter. Coconuts, because I darn near starved on that island. We didn't have good food at all.
Mm-hmm.
But in 45, I had very good food. New Caledonia.
Sure. Now, go back to where you were before. You're talking about how you'd gotten into Chinooks, and then you progressed into those satellites.
I stayed 10 years on satellite stuff.
And what's that mean, satellites?
Well, nuclear satellites. They'd put satellites up, and we'd fly around over the world, see how we received it.
Mm-hmm. So you were on a big test plane. And what kind of plane was it?
It's same as a Boeing 707.
So a modified 707, and you'd fly around the Earth.
It's a military version, a 135B model.
Yeah.
It's big engines.
Okay. And you'd fly that and see how
I'd
this.
stay with it.
Yep.
I'd take different crews with me.
Yeah.
So,
And you'd find out if the satellites were working.
right.
And what year was this that you were doing this?
From 70 to 80 when I retired.
Okay. And was that pretty interesting work?
Oh, young.
How so?
It was good, interesting work.
How come?
It got a little hairy at times, but you had a good time.
Well, when did it get hairy?
Well, one night coming out of Bermuda, you heard about the Bermuda Triangle.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in it 100 times. I thought it was a joke. We lost all electrical power this one night. The airplane started straight down from 30,000 foot.
Wow.
The pilots couldn't tell where they were. It was dark.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know what set instruments to read.
Yeah.
So by the time we got 38 knots from Mach 1, I've got a card right here from the guy that was with me. Just got a card from him.
You almost broke the speed of sound
Almost.
on this dive. So what happened?
Went down, turned 180 degrees back to Europe. We were coming to right path.
Yeah. And so you,
Some night.
well, what happened?
So about 15,000 foot, the airplane started to seem like it knew how to fly.
You got
Boy,
some power back.
20 seconds from going in the ocean.
Oh
That's
man.
close as I want to be.
Wow. That must have been scary.
But we cracked the left wing. Boeing had to come up with a fix on it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have a fix. Boeing had never cracked a wing like we did.
Wow.
But they come up with a fix, made a part, shipped it in here.
Now tell me a little bit about what you did after that. When did you retire?
80.
In 80. And then what did you do after retirement?
Enjoyed myself. We traveled
Yeah.
with a 37 cord.
And when did you get that? Was that in your family?
I've had a cord since 48, really.
Really?
So,
And you've had different ones.
different ones, right?
And that's a beautiful car. They say
Yeah.
it's a sculpture on wheels.
Mm-hmm. So
And,
they say.
And you, tell me about how you, the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Museum.
Then the club started in 48. I joined the Cord Clark Club out of Texas. That's to keep a cord automobile running.
Mm-hmm.
Then in 52, Harry Dennard, he'd been to right field years ago. He decided Auburn Cord Duesenberg should get together. So I got a card right here.
But you were one of the charter members of the.
Yep.
Say that.
I'm a charter member of Auburn Cord Duesenberg.
Museum.
Club.
The club. Okay.
Then the museum started years later.
And you helped start the museum too.
Helped start the museum.
And
The museum is where the original parts were kept for Auburn Cord Duesenberg.
it's great. A great place. Now, also you flew an airplane for many years.
Luscombe.
And where did you fly?
I had Aeronca.
Yeah. But you flew at Barnard's, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we're out of tape over here. So, but keep going. You.
But I joined. I flew out of
Barnhart's in New Carlisle.
yeah,
And
but
who flew with you?
out
up
of
there?
many fields
Sure.
around here.
And who was up there as a pilot with you up there too?
Gus Grissom.
Yeah.
Man, there's so many pilots up there from
Yeah.
the flight test.
Okay.
I forget them all.
That's all right. And so you also are involved in the Fairborn history a little bit.
Well, yeah, since I'm the first kid born in New Osborne,
What year were you born? What day? What's your birthday?
November 12th, 1922,
And what house were you born in?
on 58 South Wright Avenue in Osborne.
And so you guys have been really helping keep the history of Fairborn.
More or less.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, I wished I had this written down originally.
Oh yeah. You're just winging it.
Winged it.
That's what all pilots do, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bob. Thanks for talking with us, and we really appreciate your service.
Okay. That's it.
Yeah, that's good. Now just wait.
And made that Chinook, drew it.